I think we do have freedom of choice. We do have a plan when we get here, and and it can be fuzzy, which is to say that I think in our soul's journey, we make an intentional choice to have this experience, this body, this life, these parents, these even friends, and this kind of life. But as we enter into that body, from what I've read, it becomes sort of fuzzy, and we don't remember exactly what we're trying to do. And so we do our best to kind of figure it out and make mistakes and somehow go through tough or bad periods, and we're kind of belaboring through all of that. And if we're lucky, we find ways to get that clarity.
2, 1, 0.
Hi, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion, and this is incredible because I'm interviewing again the person that was my first episode on this podcast. When I started, I recorded about 15 episodes, and his was one of the most connecting, alluring that I felt was supposed to be the first one. So now, so many years later, we both evolved and changed and learned new things. His method evolved, and his method is all about connecting to your right hemisphere of your brain, because that area of your brain is that your connection channel to higher self, to creation. And in this episode, we dove deep into more of the spiritual, philosophical ideas of what it is that we are connecting to, and what are the infinite possibility of doing this work. And one of the evolutions of this work with Bill that he created because of his personal experience was how to deal with grief, and we talked about that. And it was just so nice to connect with him. And I use this method, I don't know, at least once a month, once or twice a month, for the last many years since I've learned it from him. And so I hope you will love it. I hope you will enjoy it. If you do, please comment, review, let me know. The link to the first episode with Bill will be in the show notes, or you can go to stellarlifepodcast.com and just look for the first episode in the search box, and you will learn a lot from it. And you will hear what kind of a podcast host I was a long time ago. So I hope you enjoy the show. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hi, Bill, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Thank you so much for being here again. It's so phenomenal having you here on the show again. Thank you.
Thanks, Orion. It's great to come back for this return engagement. It's been a few years.
It's been actually, it's been 8 years.
Wow.
You've been my first ever episode on the show. I recorded, I think, 10 or 15 episodes, and I put your episode number 1 because I loved it so much. We had such a beautiful connection, and I just loved everything you talked about. And a lot of things happened.
Well, how come I look so much older and you look the same?
You look the same. You look pretty much the same too. So, what happened in the last 8 years? What are some like amazing aha moments? I know you grew and you expanded and you do so many more things. Maybe you can share a little bit of an update about it.
I guess what I would wish for all of your listeners is when you can find that work that aligns with your passion and with your potential and with your skill set. That's a really good place to be, because it doesn't feel so much like you're working. It feels like you're just every day you wake up and it's like, oh yeah, I get to do some fun, cool stuff today. And I'm lucky. I didn't always feel that way in life, but I have for the past 15 years. And that's a great luxury to be in that zone where you feel like you're making a contribution, making a difference, helping people, and learning and being curious and being able to, make a difference in people's lives and in the lives of companies. So it's really just been a continuation of all of that in more places. However, I teach now. I'm on the faculty at IMD in Switzerland and the Modern Elder Academy in Mexico and in Santa Fe. And still teaching at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. And then I've done things in other places around the world too, in Canada and Italy and others. So it's really discovering just how universal the need for connection and for purpose and for discovering, what makes us tick and kind of why we're here on the planet in the first place. Like, what's our purpose for even being here? So I guess my views have evolved. I've done a lot of work in that realm and met a lot of people on this journey that are doing work around what's next and that consciousness survives death. And so that's been really fascinating because my beliefs have changed to include a belief now that our soul's journey is one that we choose in this lifetime, what we want to do, who it is, the family, the lessons we're here to learn. And then we kind of come into this incarnate form and forget a lot of stuff along the way, but try our best, hopefully, to do and learn whatever those lessons are. And then we go on to our consciousness survives our body and we go on to whatever's next. So, and I've had a lot of experience also in the last 2, 3 years with grief and helping people process their grief because I lost several significant people in my life over these past 8 years, including both parents and some friends. And so learning and wondering about that has opened up a curiosity that's led to new information and new possibilities.
Would you say that you're more connected to creation than ever before?
Yes, I feel like it's not just a random accident that we show up on the planet for whatever many years that we have. I feel like there is this sense that we're here for a purpose, and where the dots connect for me is using this technique that I learned in therapy 27 years ago, specifically how to tap into the right side of the brain, that higher consciousness, has been really helpful at, especially as I get older, at like figuring out what I still need to learn and, what lessons are still in front of me. And this process is really helpful for being able to get an awareness of those and what's missing, why I'm still having difficulty in this area or that area. And so it's helpful being able to kind of download that information while I still can, because I've always been a little bit of a procrastinator. So now at 65, I'm thinking, gee, okay, I better figure this stuff out because I hope I have quite a bit longer. But in case I don't, I want to just get to it and figure out what I need to learn, get these lessons under my belt, so to speak, so that I maybe don't have to repeat all these things and I can move on and do something else next time.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Do you think that our soul come here for a purpose? So how does it work? Do we have the freedom of choice, or are we like we are given some kind of a master plan, but according to our choices, we can get different outcomes?
I think yes to all three of those things. I think we do have freedom of choice. We do have a plan when we get here, and it can be fuzzy, which is to say that I think in our soul's journey, we make an intentional choice to have this experience, this body, this life, these parents, these even friends, and this kind of life. But as we enter into that body, from what I've read, it becomes sort of fuzzy, and we don't remember exactly what we're trying to do. And so we do our best to kind of figure it out and make mistakes and somehow go through tough or bad periods. And we're kind of belaboring through all of that. And if we're lucky, we find ways to get that clarity. And so that's what I found particularly helpful about learning how to activate the right side of your brain, because that's where that clarity exists in our quote higher consciousness. So even asking the basic question, what's my highest and best purpose in this lifetime? Is a wonderful question to ask and get a different perspective, because we may have always thought it was A, and then maybe it's M, something completely different, or it's related to, but it's still quite different. So it gives us an opportunity to really be more intentional about the choices we're making, why we're doing things, why we may stop doing something, and really kind of learn from our, if you will, kind of that higher part of ourselves, rather than just kind of going through the motions and charging ahead and, just doing all the kind of the sports metaphors. Oh, you just got to bust through those walls. You just got to wake up and have that protein shake and just do it, even if you don't feel like it. All that is maybe good too, but I feel like it ignores some of the higher functioning stuff that might help us on our journey.
Right. And you explained we had a whole episode on the process of non-dominant handwriting and how through non-dominant handwriting you connect to your right side of the brain, which is the side that is your creativity from the word creator, where you are connected to, you can channel different realms, you can channel completely different answers. And if you guys are listening and you haven't been here for 8 years for the first episode, or you forgot, just go to stellarlifepodcast.com. It's episode number 1. It's also going to be in the show notes for this episode. My goodness, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I know. And I would just add one thing, Orion, there that because I've noticed in one of the other observations over these 8 years, if we can tend to diminish the quality of the answers and the work itself, if we're just saying non-dominant handwriting, because it doesn't, it belies the fact that it's actually a super powerful thinking process more than it is writing with a non-dominant hand, which sounds like just hen scratching, which it sometimes can be. So it's really about learning how to activate the right hemisphere of the brain and think, to truly think differently. And the handwriting is the byproduct of the process, not the inverse. So it's the thinking that drives the writing rather than the writing driving the thinking, if that makes sense.
Right. So is it thinking or is it channeling?
That's a great question. And I would say it's some of both, really, because in these 27 years, I've seen, surprisingly, I found myself, and psychologists would say intuitive writing, which this also applies and is used for decades and decades already in therapy. I'd say it often feels like channeling, because I'm writing something down that's unexpected, and maybe that is an answer to a question that I pose that I don't really even like. So I'm like, it may not be something that I even want to do or want to recognize. And so, in that sense, it feels more like channeling, because I don't think I would want to think about doing that. I wouldn't want to think about doing that. The fact that it's coming through anyway is almost in spite of my conventional thought process that that kind of stuff is showing up. It may be a hard medicine and difficult to swallow at times, that what we're getting. So, yeah, I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah, and I've been doing it. Actually, I've done that. I forgot we have a podcast, but I've done it. I think a couple of days ago, I woke up at 5 a.m. and I know that if I wake up, I wake up. I can't go back to sleep, and I've had a lot of things running in my head and lots of questions. And I said and I did it, and I don't know if I did it correctly, but I just did it. And one and I loved all the answers. I felt very calm afterwards. And one question is, am I manipulating this, or is it completely pure channeling? And if I am, in some way interfering in the process, what can I do to be a pure channel and purely connected to my higher self, or whatever it is, different dimensions, elders, masters, people that passed away, God, creation, angels, who knows, right?
Yeah, I think another great question. I would say that the protocol that I observe, and I get pretty, because it's worked so well, I get pretty, not that we have to be super rigid, but I get a little bit rigid about this myself. And that is to say, I always pose the question that I want to focus on. Like, so in the case that example you just gave, a perfectly good question might be, especially since it's one you're already interested in, is when I do this type of thinking and writing, am I channeling or am I thinking about this and then answers flowing forth? And then write that out completely, presumably with your dominant hand, and then kind of lock in that question. So that's step number one. Then step number two is closing your eyes and just allowing that state of flow to exist and suspending all beliefs and disbeliefs about what you may get, why, how, all that noise that we typically get in our typical thought process, and just letting all that go. And then step three is to thinking and believing and trusting that it's possible by virtue of when you put that pen or writing instrument in your non-dominant hand, it's possible that you can initiate and activate the neural pathways and indeed have a different process occurring inside your brain. This is what the Nobel Prize was based on, that those hemispheric divisions on the exist between the left and right. And when we're activating that right side, we are activating the award was also for the independence of the right side. So we are going to an independent, it's almost like going to another person. In fact, there's a great book written of Two Minds that explains just that by Michael Gazzaniga, who studied under Roger Sperry and worked in his lab. It's that we are going to a different place. So if you hold all that in your mind, and then when you're doing it alone, you reread the question, open your eyes, reread the question, and then just allow it to flow. So you don't give yourself a time limit. You don't force it. It may take 2 seconds. It may take 30 seconds or 60 seconds. And you just stay there in that state of flow. And from what you said, I think the kind of meter for me is always what I'm getting. Is it helpful? Does it make sense? Is it fresh? Is it different? Is it stuff that in some cases didn't expect? That's generally a good sign that it's working for you and you're allowing that process to occur and answers to flow forth.
Mm. My reoccurring lessons in life is all about trust and surrender, over and over again.
Well, and it's thank you for being candid and vulnerable and sharing that. And so a great follow-up question you might want to ask to that is there's always this works as you're beginning to see, in a didactic fashion. So whatever is surfacing, there's always the invitation to go beneath and beyond and ask why. So why is that? So you could ask yourself the question, why is it that I'm always focused on issues of trust? And what you may find, like I did, is something happened early in life, very early in life, maybe even before conscious memories, that broke that trust for you. And even if it was broken as a very young child, the brain is so powerful it remembers it. So it's going to throw a monkey wrench every time certain issues come up because it recognized the fact and circumstance patterns that exist. So there's that. And it may be that in a previous lifetime, something happened where there was a breach and it's carried over into this lifetime. So it just makes it harder for you to operate in those zones.
I've been doing a lot of past life regression in the last few years, and hypnosis, and giving hypnosis, receiving hypnosis. I really like that, and but we can get into this trance state.
Have you tackled that issue of trust in any of those past life regressions?
Yeah, some of those, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
trust. Yeah, yeah.
Kudos to you. That's really good, difficult, important work. And I imagine you feel it's lifting your spirit, right? You don't feel as weighted down.
Yeah, every day in every way I'm getting better and better. And as an infinite being, there's infinite potential to grow and learn, and it's ever expanding, ever evolving as a human being. It's really fascinating actually. I'm really happy to be alive and here and experience all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the happy, all of it.
And so wonderful to be doing this work as I got to meet your son, and it's so wonderful to do this work with him in your world and your husband, and to just be there for one another and provide the example for him that's a more intentional, authentic, complete person, right? That he can, because we as the brain, even in a small child, picks up all these things, and they can read all these things in us. So to be putting the best version of you forward for him as well as for yourself is wonderful.
Yeah, I struggled. I struggled with postpartum depression, and I struggled with a lot of things in the last few years, and I'm sure some of my struggles and insecurities and whatever rubbed on him and affected him. But I give myself grace because it is what it is. We have to deal with what we have, and his soul came here to experience me in all my versions. And the version where I'm like here, having this beautiful conversation with you, feeling great, and also the version of me crying on the floor and being completely like feeling lost. And of course, I try not to. In one way, I try not to avoid showing my emotions in front of him. I don't want him to experience me as fake. Like this is our most. Sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm happy. This is who I am. And of course, when I was in the depth of the pain, I try to kind of like not have him show it. But he was nursing for 3 years, so it's fully connected to me all the time. And I'm sure a lot of all of my emotion were so I think the depth of my pain he felt, but also the depth of my feeling elated and expanded and all the beautiful experiences that came with that too. As long as there is love and an intention to grow, that's all we can do, right?
I agree 100%. And I believe that he chose you and to be his mother and to be part of this soul's journey that he needed to learn whatever he needed to learn in part from you. And that's a big part of his journey. And so by being authentic in the way you're fulfilling it and learning yourself and growing yourself, it's I can only imagine it's that is going to really help him as well because he's witnessing all of that and sensing and feeling all of that as well.
Yeah, and I'm a fun mom. I'm like we dance together, we sing together, we go on little adventures, we do indoor campfire with skewers that are made out of, instead of marshmallow, watermelon or
Jeez, that I've never heard. That's a new one for me. Super creative indoor campfire.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah. He
that's
invented
great.
that, and we just went along
Uh-huh.
the ride. It's really cute. With that work that you do you believe we can tap into different timelines or different versions of ourselves from the future and receive knowledge from it?
Gosh, I love yeah, I remembered that from last time too. The really good, thoughtful, provocative questions that you ask, and yeah, it's a yes with an asterisk in that I feel like it's all kind of lumped in together because, and although I've never asked specifically, for me it feels like that source, that higher self that I'm tapping into is maybe is the best version of my soul's journey through this lifetime and many others. So I'm getting that wisdom that may exist there. It also may feel like it's wisdom from guides and others that I've connected with both in this lifetime and maybe others. So it's I'm generally, I guess, satisfied enough with what I'm getting that I haven't probed too much more deeply to figure out where exactly it's coming from. Because I guess part of me is probably like, oh, I don't want to upset the apple cart necessarily because it's worked well enough that it's working that I don't want to maybe, you know, do something that's going to cause it not to work. So I'm maybe a tad superstitious with it, which seems kind of ironic that I would be, but especially after all these years. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Maybe a good question for you would be like, why am I superstitious about it? Because if time is not linear, we might be able to go back to different lifetime when where we mastered something, either in the spiritual realm or physical realm, with our body, and maybe we can get answers from that, or we can maybe connect to future versions. I don't know. This is so cool.
And as I've reflected on that a bit longer when you were posing that question, I believe I'm remembering now that there was a time years ago when I asked that question and got what I speculated earlier, that it was a combination of my my essence, uh, who I am, and at a soul level, combined with the guides that are around me. So it wasn't 100% one or the other, but a blending. If that's what I recall from years ago. But I'm going to try it again, and since it's been a fair amount of time, and I'll email you back if I get something different.
I would love that. Thank you. Maybe I can do the same and I can ask the same question. Very curious. It just seems like my personal psychic abilities have been really grown in the last few years, and it's really fascinating.
I think when we experience loss of physical death of loved ones, especially who were so completely bonded to and connected to on their journey, once their journey on this planet ends, we search for meaning, right? And we wonder, gosh, is that it? Are they just 6 feet under and it's over? So I think it's more likely to think that we want to take the deep dive, do the investigations, read about this phenomenon. There's a great book and a Netflix series by the same name, Surviving Death by Leslie Kane, that I can highly recommend as an entry point for taking a look at all of this. And I think if you read her book or watch the series, 6, 7 part series, was one of the top ones on Netflix, in fact, a couple of years ago, that you'll come to the conclusion that we do. I mean, there's so much empirical evidence that in those chapters and stories that you come to the conclusion that we do survive bodily death.
Yes, absolutely we do. And it's beautiful actually.
And that even more so that some have the gift that they're able to communicate with those that have gone on and crossed over to the other realm.
Yes, I've been in this evening with this psychic, and she just had a group of us, and like spirits came through, and she described them, and she's like, does it resonate with somebody? And like a person would raise their hand, and they had like a full blown conversation with details that are so incredible, like names, specific things that are out of the ordinary, that were so specific and accurate that it's undeniable just to sit in the presence of something like that.
Yes, and I would agree. I've seen that as well. And in fact, I've been a guest speaker at several different grief conferences now that, and I can definitely recommend a resource. The Forever Family Foundation was formed by Bob Ginzerb and his wife 20 something years ago. when they lost their daughter and were looking for answers to many questions. And they also, unfortunately for them, came across some mediums that did not give them, took the money, but did not give them what they felt was an appropriate reading or counsel. So they now are in the business of certifying mediums, and they have a science board that is like 20 members deep. And as by disclosure, I'm also on their board as of last year, board of trustees. But they do a superbly good job, and they have tons of resources. They're a nonprofit on their website about. They have a podcast, a blog, radio show. They have articles. They have only the 17 in the world mediums that they've certified, having passed their test of being legitimate, and which they do all these double blind studies and all that. So if people are in doubt of just going to anyone, I don't think all of them are the same. I think some have the gift and some do not. So you want to go to somebody that you know and can trust. And so I would definitely recommend foreverfamilyfoundation.org, their site, and they have them all listed as a possibility.
Yeah, and by you sharing that, I really feel your heart. It feels like you've been through your grief and your pain, and you really want to help people. How did you deal with your grief? Well, what did you do?
Yeah, I felt the need to spend time away and alone, and not completely alone, but away from the everyday. So I had did something I wanted to do years earlier, but decided not to because my parents needed me, and they both had various forms of Parkinson's, and so I didn't want to leave them. But after they had passed, I did what I wanted to do maybe 10 years earlier, and I bought a home in Rancho Mirage, California, went into the high desert, and had a lot of quiet time, a lot of time for reflection. And I didn't see the same old everything that would remind me of them because they died 11 months apart. And being there for 5.5, 6 years, not full time, but half the year, and then in St. Louis, where I'm from, the other half of the year, it became easier to deal with all that. But there were many amazing, beautiful experiences, even messages that came through from them, and signs that appeared in the kind of in the world. And probably the most striking of which, I don't know if you have time for this, but it's a short story. I can.
I have time for this.
Okay, so the most striking was, and the saddest was my youngest brother who died at age 23, and committed suicide, and was just a really beautiful person and soul, and very smart and talented, and just ran into a number of issues and difficulties with drugs and alcohol, and just a whole variety of things. So he had been gone for so long at this point that we were in the backyard at the pool at the house in Rancho Mirage when my partner walked over to when the dog was like doing something in the grass, and he walked over to see what was going on, and then also noticed that the door that came into the backyard was wide open, and it was normally locked and closed, and only the gardeners would come in and out. And so he closed that door, which was super odd in and of itself because it had been closed earlier in the day. And then hours later, it somehow was open with no one being around. And then he noticed a yellow and black bird that was in the grass, and that was nearly dead, and brought that over to me. And that's what the French bulldog had been looking at and trying to sniff around. And so when he looked at that bird and brought it over, I was like, gosh, I think it's dead, isn't it? And he goes, no, it's still kind of alive. And so he put it on this bougainvillea branch in back of us. And then it, in seconds, kind of reaffirmed and grabbed onto that branch, and then got stronger. And then a couple beats after, took flight from the branch, flew around the pool 3 times to our shock and amazement, us just like dumbfounded, looking up, watching it, and then took off. and importantly, I guess the most important punchline of this was that this all happened on the anniversary of my brother's death, March 6th. So when I thought about all of that, and I had been thinking about him earlier in the day, and I always had a sense of empathy and sadness with his passing. I guess, and not only did he die young, but he also committed suicide. So it's always this really, difficult memory to confront even decades later. And so I went to my journal and used the version of this process that I had learned, as a way of tapping into our higher consciousness and asked, what was that? Was that a message for me, or what just happened in the yard? And indeed, I got what clearly came through for me as a message from him, it felt like, because he said, I don't want you to think of me any longer as that bird that's dying, or I'm now soaring. I'm in a much better place. Don't worry about me any longer. And so when I got that, obviously that changed a lot of things. And I since then, that's been a couple of years ago now that happened. I do feel very differently about him, and feel much happier that he is in a restored state, and he's quote soaring, and it's made a huge difference in the way I feel about his passing.
Right. That's beautiful.
And then with my mother, the message was one of a request for forgiveness, because at the end she was in a state with the Lewy body Parkinson's that she said and did some things that was totally uncharacteristic of the relationship that she and I had earlier in life for, uh, my 50 something years. And so it was a request from her, it felt like, to forgive her for those things, and that she didn't mean them, and it was, the disease that had taken over, and asked if I could forgive and move forward. And so there were things like, and then other messages from my dad about being proud of what I was up to and doing, and kind of doing the reaffirming that he would typically do in front of big speeches or opportunities or work products. And so it's really felt to me that their consciousness is around, and it's been a wonderful, great feeling to know that they're with me in some way.
Yeah. And they will forever be with you and love you and be proud of you. Always. This lifetime, next lifetime.
Yeah, and it's something we want to believe, right? But it's when you actually see the words and feel the words, and even kind of hear it in their voice even. And in my dad's case, the when I went back and compared the handwriting from my non-dominant hand that was being, in this case, probably channeled through that handwriting, and especially the last part, love dad, was almost a photocopy of his signature from 10 years before, which I wouldn't have remembered exactly how I would have signed it or wrote it, or in the exact same handwriting style. So there's some fascinating things going on.
Beautiful. Wow. I wish we had more time together. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing this beautiful story with me. I just really love you and I love your heart. I think you're an incredible human being. And thank you for taking your precious time and being here again. So please say goodbye for now. What are your three top tips to live in a stellar life, and where can people find you?
Thank you so much, Orion. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I want to hear more about whatever else you're up to next time. WilliamDonius.com is my website. That's probably the best place. I'm on LinkedIn as William Bill Donius, when more for the business work that I do with big companies. So those, Bill at WilliamDonius.com is my email address. So thank you for that opportunity as well.
Thank you too. I appreciate you. Before we leave, do you have any tips for a stellar life to share with the audience? Even like 3 words.
Be intentional. Did it in two.
Good job.
Like don't just go through don't go through the motions. Be intentional about your actions, and we get this wonderful opportunity in this lifetime, and we want to use it wisely.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate you very much.